I really want to talk to you guys about SEO. Are you guys excited? Yeah. I'm really excited. So, public service announcement. Before I really get into everything, this is really important since we're talking about reputation. For any of you who saw the Milestone music video, I am not a serial killer. I'm sorry that was the perception. I don't even like knives. I cry when I cut onions. It's a whole thing. I'm sorry. Hopefully we can get past that and actually talk a little bit more, but I don't want anyone to feel threatened while I'm up here. So, anyways, SEO. SEO is fantastic. I love it. I've dedicated the last, I don't know, half of my life to it. I'm super young, so that's not really a big statement to make. But one of the things that really excites me about SEO is the fact that we always need to have technology and buttons and big green ones that let me push to the next slide. So it's kind of ironic, as advanced as we are in SEO, as much as I love looking at algorithms and formulas and patents, I really don't understand technology. I have a big problem just with the big buttons. So bear with me as if we have technical difficulties. So one of the things that I love to do, and one of the things that SEOs always have a hard time with, is how do we predict the future? Where is technology going to go? Is there a way for us to be able to actually see with an accurate eye what is going to be happening in the near future and how can we get there, right? And there are a couple ways to do it. One way is to have the head of engineering as your next door neighbor and maybe give them a fruitcake and see what they think. Have them present at a conference, which is always fantastic. I don't have that advantage, so what I tend to do is I tend to go and actually read Google's patents, which is an incredibly geeky thing to do. I don't expect anyone else who actually has a life to do that, but here I am. The problem is that reading Google's, the closest we get is reading their patents. The problem with that is that Google is a multi-billion-dollar company. And because they're a multi-billion-dollar company, they follow the same legal proceedings that a lot of multi-billion-dollar conglomerates do, which is they frequently request that their patents go unpublished until they're granted. Which means that if all you're doing is reading Google's patents and trying to understand what every other SEO expert in the industry is saying is the next biggest thing, or the most important thing to happen in the last 10 years, voice search, or that we need to make sure that we revolutionize our websites, mobile optimization, then you tend to get a little behind, up to as much as 3 to 5 years. So you take an example here. This was a patent that Google had. It was called Storing Semi-Structured Data. I'm not going to bore you with the details because nobody other than me actually finds this stuff interesting. But what we see here is that it was filed in October 6th, 2014. We didn't know anything about it. SEOs didn't know anything about it until it was granted on September 5th, 2017, which means that there were 3 years between when Google actually developed the technology and when the rest of the SEO specialists found out about it, right? So there's this big discrepancy. So how do you make up for that? You make up for that with R&D, with testing, with trying to validate what Google said. Have you guys ever heard the phrase trust but verify? I love that phrase, especially with SEO, because that tends to be the case more often than not. So, how do you stay ahead as a business owner? That's a great question, Michael. Let me tell you. So, it's really easy to fall behind, and it happens all the time. You feel like you're running up an escalator going down, and if you just stop to take a breather, you're already halfway down the stairs again, right? The easiest way to do it is you have to think forward-thinking. You have to be 3 years into the future. So, what does that look like? We did a lot of testing, and this is what we think the foundational aspects of SEO going forward in the next 18 months to 2 years is going to be. Some of the most important stuff is going to be voice search. Voice search is, like we've talked about, the wave of the future. A lot of people love not even having to look at their phones, right? You have people in their cars. Google Auto is a recent app that Google just released on Android. We also see things like being prepared. We talked a little bit about security. We talked about ADA conformity. We've talked about GDPR. We've talked about how your site needs to be able to load in under 2 seconds. We talked about the actual real fiscal impact that affects your consumers if they're in a country or in a region where it costs them up to half of a month's salary to just load a really bloated video on your website, right? Mike brought that, it was a really cool point. I'd never heard of that before, I never considered that. I'm gonna go home and make sure that all of my YouTube videos are not like 5 seconds long. The other thing is that you need to make sure that your website is indexable, right? If there's a tree and it falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm sure scientists in the room will tell me, yes, Jack, you're kind of dumb. Of course it does, but it's all relative. And then obviously, the biggest thing, the biggest shift, the foundational shift that has happened over the last 18 months is that Google no longer cares much about keywords. I'm going to say that one more time for those in the back. Google does not care about keywords. And here's the reason why. They care about entities. They care about schema. They care about things. Google, since the beginning foundation of their company, has said, our mission statement is to understand and categorize information online. They didn't say websites, they didn't say keywords, they said information, right? And nowadays, the best way, easiest way to do that is through a universal language that Google, with other search engines like Bing, have come up with called SCHEMA. My personal goal today is to just be able to say, and you get SCHEMA, and you get SCHEMA, and you get SCHEMA. We'll get there. That's the foundation. And oh, by the way, Mike already brought this up, and many other people already did too. Mobile optimization is incredibly important. So much so that 52% of all users across the globe, so the previous statistic was 63%, 52% was internationally, those 52% of the population who use search engines only use their mobile phones. They don't use desktop. So what does that mean? Tactically speaking, let's start talking tactics. Tactically speaking, we got to make sure we use the 80-20 rule, right? I'm sure you guys have heard of this. This is a big business thing. 20% of what you do affects 80% of your revenue, right? It's the same thing in SEO. 20% of what you do in SEO affects 80% of your traffic and revenue. What's that 80%? Well, we just talked about it, right? So it should be pretty familiar. Entity building, indexing, mobile, speed, security, entities. So what does it actually mean? How does Google figure out things? Like we said, they use schema. What is schema? Schema is a universal language that helps Google understand, what am I looking for? Did I find something cool? Does it match what my users want? Groovy. Let's share it. Let's see it in real life. Let's say I decided that I wanted to look for Back to the Future. Back to the Future is one of my favorite old 80s classic movies. It is by far the greatest franchise outside of Star Wars. I will debate anyone. But one of the cool things here is that as you start thinking about a user, you start thinking, what would a user actually want? Well, let's take a look. What Google has understand is that users really want star ratings. They want reviews. They want to know where to find the movie. They want to know what the plot is. They want to know who the main characters are. They want to know when it's coming up in the next week. Where can they get it? Can you get it on Amazon? Can you get it on Hulu? Can you get it on Netflix? These are all really important things. So the tactical thing that we need to start understanding is, again, twofold, right? 80-20 rule, and then the number one thing that will always steer you in the right direction no matter what changes and no matter what shiny thing is out there we're trying to chase as SEO experts is, what is it your customer wants, right? What is it that your customer really needs? And oftentimes, what is it that they need that they don't know they need, right? That's really what we care about. So if you keep that as your core philosophy for marketing and for business, then you're going to be able to understand and you're going to be able to predict accurately what's going to come up and what actually applies. I know we had a question earlier about technology and which should we pick. Does it match what your users need? Does your user need it? If they do, let's get it. If they don't, we'll wait, right? We did this for a company of ours who we helped implement schema across their entire website. The cool thing that we saw was year over year, after we implemented the schema, we saw a 73% increase in clicks. That means real people going to the website. We also saw a 77% increase in click-through rate, meaning that the messaging and the information that we were giving them on the search results pages was resonating with them on a much deeper level. Also, we saw a 61% increase in impressions, meaning more people were seeing it. Pretty cool. But, again, it doesn't really matter if you can't be found, right? So, how do you get found? What more can you do? Google only really allocates, because there's so much information from the websites out there, they only allot a certain amount of effort and energy and time into crawling a specific website. So the faster your pages can load, the more pages Google can crawl in that allotted amount of effort and time. It also helps improve people bounce to the website. It also helps make people happy. But there's also a couple other things. It kind of affects your bottom line. If you accidentally increase your page speed by 100 milliseconds, and you're, let's say, making $100,000 a day in sales, you're losing 7% of your revenue just by your page speed. So, kind of that, right? But it can also improve your bottom line. Let's say you improve your page speed by 1 second. Then all of a sudden, when you're making $100,000 a day, you now have $7,000 of incremental revenue from nothing other than just compressing some images, minimizing some JavaScript, and buying your developer a really nice glass of wine, right? Did we forget to mention was also a ranking factor? Because that's a big one. It's so important that you're fast, but it's also important that you're mobile optimized. We've talked a lot about that, so I won't go into it. I bolded thumbs because I have little stubby thumbs, and it really, it hurts me to my core emotionally when I can't, get to the top left or top right corner of a part of my website. So, for me, please, put all the cool stuff in the bottom right-hand corner. I appreciate it. Let's take a look at FAIRBANKS. So FAIRBANKS was a really cool website that we completely revamped, right? We optimized their mobile user experience, we improved their page speed, we wrapped their entire website in schema, and what we ended up seeing was that their visits increased by 32% before and after, and their bounce rate also decreased by 22%, meaning that people were engaging with the website a lot better. Before we move on, quick detour. I know we talked about it. I know it's kind of the big white fat elephant in the room, right? Security is a big deal. It's kind of important. HTTPS has been a ranking factor since 2014. If you're not HTTPS, if you don't have an SSL certificate, please talk to somebody at Milestone with it. It's incredibly important that we have it. It also helps build trust with your customers. By the way, also, if you don't have it, Chrome now has this update where if you're not HTTPS, they're going to throw this little warning up, and they're not going to let their customers go to your website because they're not sure if it's secure or not. And sometimes I've even seen messages saying, these people could potentially be stealing your credit card information. Which we're not. We know we're not. But still. All right, so back to the cool stuff, right? So voice search. We've talked about it a lot. I'm not going to talk about it too much. But tactically, this is something that's continually growing. It's something that's incredibly important. Again, we saw that 61% of the people who were surveyed on why they would want to use voice search said it's because I don't have to use my hands and I'm doing a bajillion things at once, right? Which is why it's amazing. And I've told a couple people this earlier, but if you ever want to figure out if you're part of that 61%, just take your Amazon Alexa, put it in the bathroom, and just see how long and how frequently you talk to it as you get out of the shower planning your day. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. The other interesting thing too is that Amazon and Google make up about 95% of the market share. And what's interesting is that they're both on the backs of two basic search engines, Google and Bing. I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on it, other than the fact that I'm going to bring this all full circle. Google and Bing were the two primary people who made schema.org, which is the central language that everyone uses for schema, for those star ratings we saw. And if these two search engines are the ones using it not just for schema, but also for voice assistants, and they're the ones powering all of the voice assistants in the market, you can kind of see where that's important. Beyond that, schema, there's so many different tags, and more tags are being created every day. Milestone used 120 different tags to be able to give Google a full understanding of what your website is about. And a really interesting update, actually breaking news, and it completely ruined this slide for me personally. 3:13 p.m. today, my phone started blowing up, and what ended up happening was Google made an announcement that they were creating a couple of new tags, the speakable tag for news publishers, and then a whole other section for local events. So, a tactical thing, I'm going to riff off for a second, I apologize. If you guys have an event calendar, and you guys want to start getting a ton of local events and get market share around what's going on in the local news section, here's what you do. You take your event calendar, whatever your /events subfolder is on your website. You wrap that in schema, both speakable schema, the news schema, and the local event schema. And here's why you do this. Because Google now has two new actions that they can do. One through Google Assistant, one through their actual search results. The Google Assistant is the news section. If you take your local events, everything that's happening around your hotel or wherever your local attraction is, and you feed it into your events calendar. Once you tag that with the news, not only will it appear in Google News Calendar, but people can actually say, hey, okay, Google, what's happening in Miami right now? Or hey, Google, what's the news in Miami when I travel there next Monday? And Google will tell you, according to Miami Inn and Suites, there is a new event, a free concert happening 5 miles away from where you're going to be staying in your hotel. Let me share you the link. And what they'll do is they'll send the link to your website that has that specific event on that event calendar to their phone. On top of that, the other thing you can do, which is really cool, and I'm just going to read a little bit of this because, again, breaking news article, this is verbatim what the article says. This new update covers all types of events like concerts, local festivities, cooking classes, museum happenings, search terms like events near me. There's also a For You tab that delivers events based on personal interests, and Google has provided the tools, SCHEMA, for optimizers to mark up their events listing, so you should see big happenings and smaller meetups happening in your neighborhood, like local dance classes. Raise your hands, how many people actually offer events like that at their hotel? So this is something that would be really useful, right? So let's make sure that we get that set up so you guys have that strategy. Okay, last slide, I promise. Recap. Voice is here. We talked about it. There's breaking news happening every day. New schemas popping up all the time. Alexa skills are kind of trashy right now, but it's just like the iPhone was back, 2010? Where are we now with that, right? So let's get on the future. Optimize for mobile users. Security is important. Google is an amazing thing. Thank you so much for everything. We love you guys. Kanika is going to take you to the promised land.
All right, we just had an amazing news update from Jack as well as on-page SEO stuff. What I'm going to be talking about is off-page SEO. What do we mean by off-page SEO? Anyone? Completely new thing, right? Just arrived. It's all the links and the local things that you guys do. That's all your off-page SEO. Anyone who has not been to your website yet and is on Facebook searching for you, on Yelp searching for you, on GMB, all of this has been talked about like 3 times today, so my presentation is really easy. But as Greg said, I'm going to be taking you into the tactics of the off-page SEO, sharing some case studies and real-time examples from our clients, when they did it, what type of impact they saw. So let's get started. Let's take a look at the customer journey first. It's always this awareness, consideration, engagement, conversion, and experience. But what has changed year on year is how users are flowing through this customer journey, and most of them now start the customer journey on GMB, and many of them end it on GMB or big knowledge panel. And that's huge, right? Where did that traffic suddenly go that was coming to your website? It's now on Google My Business. And they're doing their awareness, engagement, consideration, and converting on Google. So let's look at what does this mean for us as businesses and what can we do to react to these changes. But before we jump into this, I just wanted to kind of put some of the updates that has been happening in local SEO. Previously, when we talked of updates, we just talked of SEO updates. Now we have local specific updates and a lot of them. In these 7 months, 55 total updates have been made, and most of them pertain to GMB. Google Posts now have videos. On last 12th of July, Google added a call to button on Google Posts, which means people can just look at your offers, call you right from your Google Posts. Are we spending all the time chasing these updates? No, because what Greg presented, Google is going back to the 3 basic things. These things have not changed in the last 5 years. And these 5 core things are relevance. How relevant are you for that non-branded long-tail query that is happening? We'll talk about some of the tactical ways of becoming relevant for those queries and showing up high in local searches. Distance. We can't do pretty much a lot with distance because we have a business location. But again, distance plays a factor in the ranking as well. If you're located too far away from a destination, for the search query, your result might not show up. Prominence is the third one, and of course, reviews play a lot of role. Greg talked about that, but prominence also comes in from how many channels are you present on, and what type of information are you showing to your users. We'll talk about prominence as well in detail. Let's get started with relevance first. When we're talking of relevance, and now let's go back to our customer journey, awareness, right? I don't know which hotel am I going to stay at, but I know I'm going to Sedona. So I'm looking for things to do that I can do in Sedona. The most attractive thing kind of gets my attention, and I start searching for it. There is one long tail query that we're showing on the screen, and with branded queries or short tail queries, how many of us have seen Expedia TripAdvisor fill up the first page, right? They take up the spots and you have nothing available. Long tail queries is where the juice is, because your customers in their language are not really using short tail. In reality, we are using full sentences, we are speaking the language. So in this case, writing blogs, having the event calendars that Jack talked about, or newsrooms can really help you. These are low-hanging fruits. Writing relevant content that is not branded can get you there. And this link is right below TripAdvisor and a lot of other OTAs and government sites also, so pretty strong. Now, when users have selected, okay, they're going to go to this particular destination, they're looking for, now tell me what are the hotels that I can stay at. And this is where relevance comes in through Google My Business. If your profile is not at the right address, your pin is not on the right maps location, that's where you do not show up in local 3-pack, but if you've done the other way, you will be there in the local 3-pack. This is something that we used to miss a lot. And we, I mean all of us. Social was more of just talking to the users and not really correlating it with the local ranking factors. But as Greg talked about, and in the earlier presentations as well, social has really taken more of impacting the local rankings through engagement. When we're talking of establishing your relevance, we're talking about destination level content that users are really searching for before they come to your hotel, or stay with you, or know about what your hotel has to offer to them. Arabella Hotel is posting a lot of good content about destination searches or destination related topics. The national average of Facebook engagement today, after their cool update that they made earlier in the year, is 0.60. They are getting a 13% engagement rate on their posts. How? They are writing good content, looking at the demographics, and boosting their posts. Alright, now once we have relevance established, what is the other thing to care about? We want to be prominent. We want to be there where users are going and searching for our businesses. Google, Bing, Yelp, Foursquare, Facebook, all these channels come to mind, right? But the key is not just being there. The key is being there with accurate information and constantly revisiting them. Because with these 55 updates that we just talked about, how are we catching up? We need a medium or a method where our information can be automatically fed on all these channels, regardless of which feature was rolled on which channel at what time. Because our time is well spent in solving customers' problems. Alright. Here is a case study going back to Arabella Sedona. They started in November to look at their local strategy, really cleaning up their data, because accuracy of your information is the first thing that defines the prominence of your business. Then of course revisiting it constantly to make sure if new features are being rolled out on GMB or new pictures are clicked at the hotel, we go back and push them. Today, in the month of June or July, their consistency scores across the channels that matter to their customers looks 100%. What does that do for them? It uplifts their visibility for non-branded searches on both maps and searches. So we are talking about local 3-packs, we're talking about those long-tail non-branded queries, we're talking about people looking for hotels near this address in Google Maps. That's great. So 63% month-on-month increase after they, and how many of us have heard this SEO takes time and links do not show results. They do. If you do them right, you set yourself right with clean information, push constant updates, they do. 90-day period, they were able to see a huge lift, and this trend was not just 1 month. It has lifted their traffic for the full year of 2018. Similar trend, Google updated their API and allowed business users or business owners to push amenities on Google My Business. Hotel NIKKO, in a competitive market, San Francisco Union Square was able to leverage this opportunity, push all their amenities right into the knowledge panel. Great for the user experience. What does that do for their business? It uplifts their visibility in search and on maps both. So these things really work. Small items, tactical, but they do impact. Prominence also includes trust, building trust, and engaging the users. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about trust because we already had the Yelp session and Greg covered it a little bit as well. But having reviews, good reputation, and managing it is important. A lot of users are reading reviews before they decide whether they're going to stay with you or not. So let's make sure we're focusing on reviews. But let's spend some time here. How can we engage through these local channels, engage with our users through these local channels? I'm taking 3 different examples, but there are many more ways that businesses can engage their users. The first one that I'm showing here is a restaurant example. If you have a restaurant at your hotel or you own a restaurant, pushing menus directly into Google is a great way because who goes to a restaurant without knowing what they're going to eat or what this restaurant has to offer? So we look at the case study of after this restaurant pushed the menus into Google, what happened. Another great way, which Greg talked about, if you're not answering those questions that users are asking, someone is answering those and there's no guarantee those answers are correct. So Casa Monroe's Hotel, we proactively worked with them, found out their top FAQs, posted them that not only proactively answered the questions, but there are now local experts going in and reconfirming that that's true or what their experience was, and hence sending engagement signals back to Google. So that's a great way. And the third thing, which is not very new, but a lot of businesses have not leveraged that opportunity. For spa, for restaurants, highly recommend message the business functionality. It's available on Facebook, available on Yelp and Google. Providing a phone number and allowing the users to directly message you is a great way to engage your users and convert them. All right, let's go back to the case study that I was talking about. What happens when menus are pushed onto Google directly? This restaurant already had an existing Google My Business profile, so we didn't launch a new profile or didn't do anything. All we did was end of February push their menus onto Google, and you see a direct uplift. This chart shows the impression or the visibility data, but on the top we saw a direct correlation with when visibility went up, what happened to the actions that people took. How many people went to the website, phone calls, or even driving direction requests, 2x. So that's great, and this is all available to us in our Google My Business profile. So we're not paying extra for any of this visibility. All right, our favorite thing, right? Bookings. Let's talk about if user is not coming to my website, where else and how else can I convert them directly? We don't want to lose that booking to a third party or OTAs for that matter. Here are a couple of ways that we can get that direct booking. First one, Google Posts. It's not for hotels, but there's a lot of opportunity. If you have a restaurant at your hotel and you have a bed and breakfast deal, for sure, let's take advantage of that, promote it, and get that direct booking. In this case, we're talking of a jewelry store and an event that they had. We leveraged Google Posts, and we're going to take a look at what did that do for them in terms of impact. The good news is Bing has Bing offers now, And what the good news is, it's available for hotels. Can we clap? So basically, what this is on the knowledge panel, you can put an offer or a deal or a coupon that is available at your hotel and let users directly convert and not lose that booking to the OTA. So if you have a 15% discount going on, put it out, and we have an example of a hotel using it already. Another one, if there's a spa or a restaurant, again, a direct booking could be find a table and get them to your open table booking widget. So these are some cool ways. Let's look at the impact of what a Google post can do. The May event was a charms event at one of our clients, James Avery. 102% increase in their visibility just by this post. Of course, there were more off-page efforts going on, but this is just Google My Business visibility on search and maps. Isn't that great? One post can do magic. So anyway, conversions, and Google just added a call to action. So this post can now actually lead to a phone call as well, which is great. Summarizing it, key takeaways, 4 things to remember. Let's make sure we get relevant for those local long tail queries that users are doing because there's no OT competing for that. Number 2, let's make sure we're prominent with accurate information and we're revisiting those websites to update new features, feed new information. Create engagement with users and trust from reviews. And lastly, let's make sure we're leveraging local channels to drive those bookings directly because now our SEO effort is not the website. It's GMB, Yelp, TripAdvisor, all of it together meshed up to improve the value of your SEO efforts. Thank you so much.